Charlie Kirk, his wife's reaction. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Many of you have contacted me asking about the reaction of Erica Kirk, Charlie Kirk's widow, and what that tells us about her. It's also the case that many people across social media have had things to say about her reaction to his death. More about that shortly. In case you're not familiar with who Erica Kirk is, she's an American businesswoman and podcaster. She won Miss Arizona USA in 2012. She founded Everyday Heroes Like You, a non-profit supporting under-recognized charities, and hosts the midweek Rise Up podcast. She now, although rather unwantedly, has found herself in a position of prominence following the death of her husband, Charlie Kirk, with whom she had 2 children. They got married back in 2021, and as you know, Kirk was assassinated last week. She has utilized social media for the purposes of articulating her views. And this has drawn questions and observations about her behavior and response. Let's have a look at 2 instances of that behavior.
Oh, I love you. I love you. I love you. I know. I love you. I love you so much. I love you. I love you. God bless you.
A short clip which shows us the corpse of Charlie Kirk. We don't see his face, but we see his hands, and he's dressed in suit as his grieving widow proclaims her love for him, whilst it is all filmed and then is placed on social media. Clearly, a woman bereft by the loss of her husband and exhibiting her grief, and has chosen for this to be shown on social media for reasons which I will be returning to shortly. Here's now a second excerpt.
Jesus. Good evening. My name is Erica Kirk. Charlie Kirk is my husband. I first want to thank the local, state, and federal law enforcement who worked tirelessly to capture my husband's assassin so that he can be brought to justice. I want to thank the first responders who struggled heroically to save Charles's life, and the police who acted bravely to make sure that there were no other victims on that terrible afternoon. I want to thank the officers who have protected our Turning Point USA family these past 2 days. And I want to thank the Turning Point USA board, the COO, Justin Strife, and my husband's chief of staff, the amazing Mikey McCoy, for all their work in these terrible days to be the stability for our family and for the wider Turning Point USA family as well. My heart is with every one of my husband's employees who lost a friend and a mentor. I want to thank the staffers of his amazing Charlie Kirk show, who helped him broadcast from this studio, this chair. Every day he loved it. He loved what he did. I want to thank the millions of people who have shown their love for Charlie here in Phoenix, across America, and worldwide. I want to thank my husband's dear friend, Vice President Vance, and his phenomenal wife, Usha.
Erica Kirk's address runs for some 16 minutes, and I'm not proposing to play it all. I've given you a flavour of it, both in terms of her appearance, her demeanour, and what she talks about. As you heard there, she thanks a number of people. She later talks about how Charlie's mantra was never surrender, and how that's not going to be the case. She talks about the devotion to the church. She talks about God. She talks about her involvement with other people, and also talks about loving him. And occasionally her voice cracks and she says, "Charlie, I love you," dabs at her eye, and so forth. This appearance by her drew certain observations on social media. Let's have a look at some of them. You'll see on screen a number of the responses from Threads. "What in the Serena joy, Waterford Stepford wives creepy ass shit is this?" Reference being made to one of the main characters from The Handmaid's Tale. "She gives me Amber Heard vibes." "My husband died. For days I couldn't even see out of my swollen eyes, much less put makeup on them and be camera ready. For weeks I look splotchy, haggard and exhausted. There are still plenty of days when my grief is written on my face. This performative BS is a mockery of widowhood for the sake of the grift. I've seen better acting in porn. Full makeup to mourn her husband. Who hits the camera 49 hours after their spouse's death in full glam? She really sounds like she doesn't give a fuck that she's dead and has instead decided to milk the shit out of his assassination. As a widow, this performance disgusts and enrages me. Instead of mourning her husband, she put the burden of loss on a Charles Blueberry habit, is politically threatening people and posted a carefully curated video, including his corpse, which you saw earlier, on social media. Grief takes many forms, but this seems bizarre by any standard." Just some of the views articulated in relation to her appearance in the video that you've just seen. What are we witnessing in this appearance? As one of the posters commented, grief takes many forms. There are some people who grieve privately, that when they're in public, they maintain a composed appearance, but they cry and they rant and they rave behind the closed curtains and shut doors. There are the people who wear their heart on their sleeve and are unable to contain their grief in a public place. There are others that deem that it's appropriate to share their grief on social media. But what does it actually show? Irrespective, it does demonstrate certain traits, and some of them are narcissistic. First of all, the fact that Erica Kirk deems that it is appropriate for her to be filmed grieving over Charlie Kirk's corpse and then to go on and make an address, wearing makeup and looking presentable, etc., is the narcissistic trait of showcasing. Now, it's important that people understand that everybody has narcissistic traits. Everybody does. Whether you're normal, an empath, narcissistic or a narcissist, everybody has narcissistic traits. And just because somebody engages in showcasing, that doesn't mean that they're a narcissist. It just means that they are exhibiting that particular narcissistic trait. She's also exhibiting the narcissistic trait of pride. Pride in her husband. Pride in his movement, Turning Point USA. Pride in his achievements. She's also exhibiting the narcissistic trait of defiance. Never surrender, as she mentions later in the broadcast. It's important to remember that certain narcissistic traits are ensconced in empathic ones, so they operate in a healthy way. In other instances, narcissistic traits can be stronger than the empathic traits, so that they can be problematic. And sometimes they're stronger because they naturally are, and sometimes they're stronger because empathic traits can be receded as a consequence of erosion through an external stressor. Here, she clearly exhibits narcissistic traits, showcasing pride and defiance. There's also the possibility that we're witnessing empathic traits being shown. The empathic trait of truth seeker. She wants to be heard in relation to how she's feeling. She wants the world to understand the impact that this has had upon her. A sense of justice. She requires justice for her husband, and this broadcast is part of achieving that. Decency. She is thanking various people through this medium for the support that they have exhibited towards her in this period of grief, and also in relation to the support shown towards her husband in respect of what he had achieved. And therefore, alongside the narcissistic traits, we could also be witnessing empathic traits. In order to help people understand human behavior, I utilize a baseline classification of empath, normal, narcissistic, or narcissist. Those classifications have similarities and also considerable differences. And those of you who are familiar with my Tudor scope analyses will understand the basis upon which these are undertaken and how they enable you to understand why people behave in a particular way. So, for example, what we might be witnessing is the behavior of an empath. And therefore, born out of her emotional empathy, she deems that it's appropriate to talk about her husband in this way, that she engages in showcasing the exhibition of pride and defiance, but it is within the traits of being a truth seeker, requiring justice, and exhibiting decency. And therefore, whilst the behaviour might be deemed as rather unusual by some, because, as people have commented, they think it's performative, they're thinking, who on earth gets in front of the cameras so soon after the death of their husband? Well, it might be the exhibition of empathic traits alongside narcissistic ones. It might also be, of course, that you're looking at a normal individual whereby her empathic traits that exist have been eroded by her grief. She's lost her husband, which by any measure, for anybody that has emotional empathy and as a normal she would have, this has a significant impact upon her. And she's lost her husband at a young age when she's got young children and in violent circumstances. It's a tragedy. And as such, what this means is that she is exhibiting a reduction in her emotional empathy occasioned by the external stressor of grief caused by death, which means that her existing narcissistic traits, showcasing pride and defiance, come more to the fore. So she engages in this slightly unusual behaviour of picturing her or posting a video of her grieving over his corpse and then also making a broadcast. It might be that she's narcissistic, whereby she has emotional empathy for her husband, but her narcissistic traits are particularly strong and they are driving this behavior. It's not so much the erosion of emotional empathy, but the harnessing of a need for attention and the strong, pulsating traits of showcasing pride and defiance that have motivated this behavior. Finally, it's conceivable that she might be a narcissist, that there are no empathic traits, that there's no emotional empathy, and her narcissism, like certain narcissists do, harnesses the death of somebody else to make it all about the narcissist. As you've heard me say before, the narcissist acts like the bride at every wedding and the corpse at every funeral, i.e. they need to make it all about them, be the centre of attention. And it's potentially the case that she might be a narcissist and is using her husband's death in a performative way in order to assert control over a worldwide audience, to draw fuel by way of pity play and support, to manage a facade of decency by thanking people, and potentially obtain residual benefits thereafter. The behaviour that you've witnessed, whilst on the face of it somewhat unusual compared to the way that many people that would react, could be the behavior of an empath or a normal or someone narcissistic or a narcissist. One can create an argument for her behavior falling into any of those categories for the reasons that I've articulated. What we would need to do would be to analyze her life as a whole, looking at sustained behaviors in the past to make a determination as to what she is, and then, having done that based upon significant evidence, we could then say, well, because we've determined that she's this classification, we are now able to interpret the behaviors of crying over his corpse and making the broadcast through the prism of that finding. So, for instance, if the determination was that she is an empath, we would be able to then explain her behavior as a consequence of a mixture of those empathic and narcissistic traits. If she was found to be a narcissist, then we know that the behavior is done in order to pursue the prime aims. I've not done such an analysis yet, but so many of you asked me about this behavior that I thought it would be appropriate to explain what it is that you could be witnessing. And has been seen, there are numerous people that question the legitimacy of this behavior. But it's important for the purposes of balance to point out that any classification of person could behave this way and the reasons why. Just because somebody's grieving over a corpse in this fashion and because they go in full makeup and make a broadcast 48 hours or so after his death, that doesn't automatically make them a narcissist. They could be, but there are plenty of other reasons as to what's actually going on. And that's why it's important not to make snap knee-jerk judgments in relation to such circumstances, but to look at a range of evidence over a sustained period of time. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for watching.